It gladdens my heart that I've been asked to share my thoughts with you on a subject that has remained evergreen throughout the ages, the subject of leadership. Throughout the ages, men have asked, how do we lead ourselves into what we desire? Throughout the ages, men and women have sought to improve their circumstances through leaders. Throughout the ages, leaders of one kind or another have emerged. Throughout the ages, the subject of leadership has been interrogated. And it doesn't matter which civilization one is talking about. Leadership is at the very heart of the affairs of man. If you look at any of the holy books, the question of leadership is one that is at the very heart of it. Those of you who are assembled here who are Christians will remember the many times that the question of leadership has come to the fore. Many of you have read the story of great leaders in the Bible, such as Abraham, such as Moses, such as David, and many others. Those of you who are familiar with other civilizations will also recognize that leadership has preoccupied the minds of men. Indeed, within the continent of Africa, despite the difficulties that we have had to go through, leadership has always been at the back of our mind. And one can go into history. One can go into the history of Africa before she was colonized. And one will remember, whether you are talking about the Zulu of South Africa, or you are talking about the Ovambo and the Ovimbundu of Angola, or the Akan of Ghana, or the Yoruba of Nigeria, that the question of leadership has remained alive and well. Even when other civilizations crossed seas and oceans to come to this continent, and they enslaved us, there were leaders who rose. They may have been overwhelmed. Our kith and kin may have been taken from the shores of the continent of Africa into other parts of the world, but we never stopped leading. And when slavery lost its luster and other civilizations once again sat in Berlin in 1884 and 1885 and divided our continent into what we now call the 55 countries of Africa, our leaders were never, ever lost. The leaders were there, and they were clear in their mind that one day we would regain our independence. And I remember so very vividly that even as those other civilizations abused and denigrated the African peoples, Africans never slept through the revolution. They were alive and well and clear that the freedom that had been taken away from them would be regained. I remember so very vividly, courtesy of history, when Africans in the far lands in the Caribbean were thinking about how they would come back to the mother continent to regain their dignity. I can remember the works of great Africans such as Marcus Garvey. I can remember the great works of Africans such as Williams. I can remember the great works of your own South African Pixley Kaisa Kaseme as early as 1906, saying, we shall regenerate Africa. I can remember the voices of great Africans in those early days. I can still hear, even as I stand here, the great words of Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah say, we shall write our own history. I can remember the words of Patrice Emery Lumumba saying, we shall regain our independence. I can remember the conviction of Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. I can remember the words of Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe, reminding us that there is only one race, the human race. I can remember. And when I remember that, I remember throughout the ages that what has distinguished humanity is the question of leadership. Leaders who rise up, leaders who come up and sacrifice all and say to themselves that we shall indeed rise to ensure that our circumstances will change. You know, when we talk about leadership today, we must ask ourselves certain fundamental questions. Who is a leader? Because we live in a world today where there are men and women who, by dint of occupation of public office, think that they are leaders. But many of them are not. Many of them are misleaders. And there is no shortage of such men and women both in this continent, in this country, and the rest of the world. And it is incumbent upon us to realize that when our circumstances have been captured by men and women who are merely pretending to be leaders, then we will never realize what we desire. And what we desire is that justice must be done for all. What we desire is that the promises that have been made to us throughout the ages must be fulfilled. What we desire is that our dignity as human beings must never be undermined. What we desire is that we must give meaning to the words of the carpenter of Nazareth, that we are not children of a lesser God. What we must desire is the recognition, and this has been recognized throughout the ages, that we must be our brother's keeper. What we must desire is to ensure that we live in a world where we are judged not by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. That is what we desire. And we are gathered here today, therefore, to remind ourselves that throughout the ages, men and women have always realized their potential when there was clarity in their mind. We cannot afford to be of two minds. You who read the Bible will remember certain iconic moments in the Bible when the leaders are called upon to lead and the led are called upon to provide leadership in their own way. When you go out today, I want you to remember the story of that man called Elijah. You remember him saying to the prophets of Baal, and telling them the time has come that we must choose in order to move in the right direction. And he calls all of them and he says, let us not be of two opinions. If God is God, worship God, and if Baal is God, worship Baal. I am today telling you that when you want to be a leader, you must be able to recognize what direction you are going to face. You cannot afford to be of two minds. I can also remember in the book of the prophet Joshua, which you are aware of, Joshua assembling all the host of Israel and asking them, choose you now whom you shall serve, whether you shall serve the Lord, the gods of our ancestors before we crossed the river, or you shall serve the gods of the Amorites in whose land we sojourn, or you shall serve the Lord. As for me and my house, we have chosen to serve the Lord. Today I'm telling you that we must make choices. We must make choices and make the right choices. And you know, when I listen to the Reverend talking about those who ask him whether there is a distinction between being a pastor and being a person who is looking at the affairs of man, there is no distinction between church and politics. Church and politics are Siamese twins. Because the last time I checked, the divine instruction is that we must eat. And eating is a political issue. The last time I checked, I discovered that we must have water, and water is a political and a spiritual issue. The last time I checked, we must go to the toilet, and that is a political issue and indeed also a biblical issue. The last time I checked, there is nothing that is in the Bible which is not a political question. It is therefore the duty of a pastor to be as political as politics can be. Because before we go to heaven, we must eat. Before we go to heaven, when we are sick, we must go to hospital. We must do that. So today, I'm here before you to remind every pastor wherever they are, every man of God, that one of your greatest vocations is to be a politician. The question is, what kind of a politician? That is the only question. What kind of a politician? What kind of politics? Because there is politics and politics. And the politics that we are talking about is the politics that will liberate our countries and will liberate our minds. When I remember the history of this country, I can still remember during the dark days of apartheid, I remember the voice of Desmond, Belo, Tutu bellowing from the pulpits and telling the architects of apartheid that we cannot delude ourselves by pretending that we are singing hallelujah while our kith and kin are being judged on the basis of the color of their skin. We must sing hallelujah in the recognition that our duty is to be our brother and sister's keeper. Was Desmond Belo Tutu a man of God and a politician? He was both, and he had to be both. I can still remember the voice of Alan Busak beaming from the pulpit and saying, behold, we must fight the injustices. And I can still go and remember the voice of Christ himself telling those who are standing in the way of fairness and justice that it is incumbent upon us to be politicians. So today I'm inviting all of us to be politicians. I'm inviting all of us to be politicians because it is only when we are politicians who believe in certain virtues that we can liberate our countries. Because history has demonstrated not once, not twice, but times without number, that when we abandon our political duties, when we are not devoted citizens, there is no shortage of men and women whose only desire is to devour us. It is our duty to stand in their way. It is our duty to deny them the oxygen that they need to survive. It is our duty to tell them unequivocally that we shall not allow you to run roughshod over us. It is our duty to remind them that you cannot normalize the absurd. It is our duty to remind them that they cannot be greedy to our detriment. It is our duty to remind them that we cannot allow ourselves to be led by men and women whose only claim to fame is that they are greedy beyond measure. It is our duty to remind them that we have a duty to make this world a good world for everybody else. It is our duty to remind them that whenever we have fought slavery, whenever we have fought colonization, whenever we fight neo-colonization, whenever we have fought apartheid, we wanted our lives to be lived in a manner that was dignified. We must remind them.
That is all from today's video, and I hope you liked it. Subscribe for more content like this and hit like button to assist this channel grow. Until next time, keep safe.